Hi, welcome to Film Fiend. My name is Seb, and today I'm reviewing Troy. So, Troy is directed by Wolfgang Petersen and is written by David Benioff of Game of Thrones fame, and it is, of course, adapted from Homer's The Iliad, although it does make the caveat that it's just inspired by the Iliad in order to show that it's not proclaiming to be the definitive telling of that story, and to sidestep the claims that it's an unfaithful or bastardized adaptation, although it still faces scrutiny regardless of that caveat. Also, I should point out that this review will be of the director's cut of this film, which is definitely the definitive edition. There's way more action and brutality in this version, and it feels like a fuller and more epic film. So I'll start off by saying that most of the issues leveled against this film are due to its apparent historical inaccuracies and the liberties it takes with the source material, which is fair enough, but as I said, the filmmakers made a point of saying that this is not supposed to be the definitive adaptation of that seminal story. It's an action-adventure, swords and sandals blockbuster film that uses the source material as its framework. And for me, the disparity between the story told in this film and the original story it's based on does not bother me in the slightest, because this film is awesome regardless. I'm not going to go through every little disparity, but one of the main ones that seems to upset some people is that in the original text, Achilles and Patroclus are not explicitly cousins like they are in the film. They're described as deeply devoted comrades with an incredibly intimate, brotherly, and affectionate bond. But modern interpretations have claimed that this indicates they were lovers, a claim that is highly disputed. The text itself never explicitly describes them as lovers, but interpretations of their relationship have evolved over the years, with Plato famously interpreting that the pair were unambiguous lovers. The Iliad makes a point of highlighting their extreme devotion to one another, but never explicitly states that they are romantically involved. But in my opinion, most likely due to postmodernism and the over-liberalization of the Western education system, this has led many people to believe that they were in fact lovers, and so complaints have been leveled against this film due to perceived inaccuracies, and these grievances have been amplified by social media, because of course people love to get up on their high horse about these kinds of things in a vain attempt at virtue signaling, and they were most likely coerced into that thought process by a pretentious liberal professor in a classical literature lecture or something. But for me, there's an irony with this specific rhetoric, because why is it that men can't be really close and devoted to one another without people inferring that they're gay? That's not very progressive, but staunch liberals do love their labels and seem to have an animus towards nuance. It seems that the ancient Greeks were more progressive and weren't as obsessed with labels and stratification. Anyways, I digress. You also have to take into account the fact that there are various translations of the Iliad, and much can get lost, obfuscated, or diluted in translation. However, because of this deluded notion of inaccuracy that pertains to sexual orientation, predictably the more militant liberals have taken that specific element and made it into a talking point. And if you were to look at reviews for Troy on Letterboxd, you'll see that the most liked reviews are ones that complain about this perceived inaccuracy. In my opinion, these people are pretentious and unoriginal, and they think they're being provocative and edgy when actually they're just being a mouthpiece for a trite take that is highly disputed amongst intellectuals in an attempt to appear sophisticated and supercilious. But it amounts to nothing more than saying that it's not gay enough. Anyways, I digress again. Other than the fact that this disputed intimate relationship is totally up for interpretation, you also have to factor in that this film was released in 2004. The culture was different then, and putting a gay couple in the center of a film like this would have been pretty divisive and most likely would have put some audiences off, especially as the intended audience for films like this is majority male. I don't think Brad Pitt would have signed up for this role if they had chosen to include that type of character dynamic, and that kind of relationship wouldn't have fit in with the tone this film strikes. I really don't think it's anything to do with a deliberate misinterpretation or anything like that. It's just that it would have felt out of place in the context of the rest of the film, because the story they're telling here obviously strikes a very different tone and adopts a different approach from the source material. The texture is totally different. This is a Hollywood action blockbuster, not a poem. And you have to ask yourself, would the inclusion of a disputed romantic same-sex relationship have made this film better? Probably not. And in the broad scheme of things, it's just ancillary to the plot, and it's not a narrative focal point. It's all about the tonality they were going for with this film. For example, if we were to contrast Troy with Christopher Nolan's upcoming The Odyssey, you can easily tell just from the trailer that Nolan's film is going to be a much more serious and somber affair, with a propensity to stick closer to the texture and tonality of the source material. That's because Nolan and Peterson are very different directors with completely divergent styles of filmmaking, with films that exist in totally different epochs of the medium. And so, when taking into account the tone Peterson and Benioff were going for with Troy, the choice to have Achilles and Patroclus as cousins makes total sense and doesn't take anything away from the story. One of the driving forces behind Achilles' character is his connection and love for Patroclus, and that works just fine as them being cousins instead of possible lovers. It doesn't change his character's motivations, it just modifies the type of love from ostensibly or implicitly intimate to explicitly platonic, and this alteration does not undermine the character work or the narrative. There's also a bunch of other changes that people like to complain about, but again, this film explicitly states that it's just inspired by the Iliad, so these complaints are basically redundant. But I will point out that this film spans the Iliad and the Odyssey, or at least just the beginning of the Odyssey, because the Iliad actually ends before the fall of Troy. So this film does conflate both of those works into one, minus Odysseus' return journey. Anyway, now that I've got that out of the way, I can get on with the review proper and talk about this film for what it is and what it's trying to be without getting bogged down in the weeds of source material disparities. But one last thing I will say about the complaints against this film, for those people who want to hate on it because of its inaccuracies in a vain attempt at pretentious virtue signaling in order to show that they are a refined sophisticate who is above this Hollywood schlock, one, this film does not claim to be an exact one-for-one faithful retelling of that story, it's merely inspired by it. And two, you have to critique a film and a piece of art on its own merits, on the craft itself, and judge the film for what it is, not for what it isn't. And definitely not for some absurd notion of historical inaccuracy, when it's actually a fictional mythological legend that came first in the form of a poem. If you're looking for accuracy, then just ignore this film and read the original text. Anyways, on with the review proper. I think this film is awesome. I remember watching it loads when I was younger, and it's one of those film experiences where I'm basically smiling all the way through because of how fucking awesome it is. It's most definitely a product of its time. You would never get an action epic like this now. It has that slightly hammy, unabashedly over the top early 2000s vibes the filmmakers just wouldn't be able to emulate now. And for me, this film's flaws only add to its entertainment value. It's undeniably epic in tone and scale, with James Horner's amazing score doing a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to the grandiosity of it all. The cast is absolutely stacked as well. We get Brian Cox, Brendan Gleeson, Eric Bana, Orlando Bloom, Rose Byrne, Diane Kruger, Peter O'Toole, Sean Bean, and of course, Brad Pitt. I love Brian Cox as Agamemnon. He definitely understood the assignment. His histrionic performance is responsible for so much of the entertainment value. He's so theatrical and over the top with it, and you can tell he's having a great time chewing up the scenery. He and Brendan Gleeson were born for these types of roles. Eric Bana is another standout for me. This was back when he actually had a proper career in Hollywood before he seemingly disappeared. His character brings a much needed grounded and stoic quality to the film, and he's probably one of the most relatable characters. And of course, Brad Pitt is great as Achilles, with his chiseled, statuesque good looks and naturally aloof sensibility. And Peterson frames him like a statue a lot of the time. It's a perfect role for him. Orlando Bloom delivers his usual monotone performance, but it's actually really good casting because seeing him portray a little pussy bitch boy is highly amusing. His hit and miss performance and hammy dialogue delivery is at times inadvertently hilarious. I always laugh at basically every word that comes out of his mouth, and I find it so funny that essentially this whole story is catalyzed by the fact that he was cooking Menelaus. Again, for me, all of this just adds to the entertainment value. Also, the accents in this film are diabolical. They're all over the place. The two Aussies, Banner and Byrne, are doing some kind of generic British accent. Diane Kruger as Helen has got a slight German tinge. Pitt is just doing American, probably because even though he's a great actor, I don't think accents have ever been his strong point.
I don't have nothing to do with these things, you know.
And they just let Sean Bean keep his Yorkshire accent. So Odysseus is from Sheffield, apparently. I now understand why it was such a grueling return journey for him, travelling all the way from Turkey to Sheffield. But again, all of these little flawed elements and seemingly arbitrary components all just add to the overall entertainment value of this film, and no filmmaker could ever capture this kind of eclectic, hammy magic now. The opening to this film is great as well. I love the introduction to Achilles in this film. You've got to love Pitt as an overtly masculine, womanizing version of Achilles. Seeing him asleep in a tent with two naked women is such a badass introduction to his character, and the opening scene is so great. It sets the tone perfectly, letting us see the juxtaposition between the seriousness of Agamemnon's endeavor and Achilles' flippant attitude. And it gives us one of the most memorable and badass moments ever, where Achilles dispatches a brute with ease whilst taking absolutely no pleasure in it, as he proceeds to ask, "Is there no one else?" As if killing is as perfunctory to him as brushing his teeth. Is so cool. There's so many great lines in this film. It's so quotable, and the script is great. Benioff definitely knew the assignment, and of course a lot of the best and most iconic lines will have been drawn straight from the original text, but it's still impressive work to stitch it all together in a way that's palatable. There's this extravagance to basically every moment in this film. It's unabashedly over the top and epic, and it's never boring. It's consistently engaging despite its long runtime. The director's cut is 190 minutes, but epic should be long. And when they're as entertaining, grandiose, and action-packed as this film, I don't care how long it is. I wouldn't mind if it was even longer. All this epic spectacle is bolstered by the great costume design, sets, and locations. I watched the behind the scenes stuff, and they actually built Troy. The massive walls of Troy were real physical sets, as was the iconic Trojan horse. It's incredibly impressive production design. There's also very limited use of CGI in this film, and basically no green screen. It was all filmed on location with thousands of extras, and the majority of the CGI was used just to pad out the armies, and it all holds up brilliantly. It's so well directed by Peterson, and there's loads of epic, sprawling shots showing off the expansive scale and vastness of the locations. The scale of the armies and battle sequences is immense, and all the action set pieces are absolutely awesome. The fights are so well choreographed, they're visceral and kinetic, with swords and blood flying all over the place, and it all has a genuine weight and heft behind it. The attack on the beach is a standout sequence for me, and the one-on-one fight between Banner and Pitt is stellar. It's a tense, tactile, and dramatic duel with some of the best fight choreography ever put to screen. This film is also way more bloody and gory than I remember, although I think most of that stuff was left out of the theatrical cut, so thank God for this director's cut. But the brutality is not for no reason. It really serves the story when it comes to the exploration of the savagery, vanity, and ego of man, and the disregard for life in the face of differing ideologies, and how the ostensible will of the gods is interpreted, and how belief can be manipulated by powerful men. The abundance of death and conflict highlights the transience of existence when people come up against the fragile egos of men hell-bent on power and control. And this added brutality is most prevalent during the particularly vicious finale involving the sacking of Troy. It's a shocking scene, and it punctuates the story and its themes nicely. So if you're seeking this film out, try to find the director's cut. So overall, this is the kind of awesome action epic you just don't get anymore. It's a film of its time, and you have to take that into account when discussing it. But for me, it's the kind of film where I'm smiling and chuckling throughout because of how unabashedly over the top it is. Subtlety takes no part in this film. It's an immersive, adrenaline-fueled experience that has testosterone dripping off the screen. It's extravagant and theatrical, and somehow it manages to walk the razor's edge of being slightly pulpy while simultaneously being epic and monumental. Irregardless, it's undeniably entertaining, with great dialogue, brilliant performances, an amazing score, badass action sequences, and a fantastic sense of scale and grandeur. All these elements, along with when this film was made, all add up to such a unique experience. We'll probably never get anything like this again. I love it. It's awesome. So that was my review of Troy. If you like this video, then hit the like button. I'd really appreciate it, and it will help the channel. Also consider subscribing and hit the notification bell. But irregardless, thanks so much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.